Okay, well, let's have a moment of silence to begin with. And first of all, you go into the silence to connect with the higher consciousness. And then when you come out of that consciousness, you direct the energy any way you want to. But in this case, I'd like to say, let's take a moment and direct the energy toward the war that's going on in the Ukraine and what those people are suffering. We thank you, Holy One, for this day, this workshop, the attendees, and we pray thy Spirit be with us as we seek to understand ourselves better and better. Amen. Well, thank you all for giving up a Saturday afternoon on a rather nice day and joining here. Last time I was here 3 weeks ago, my subject was the golden thread of oneness. So if you remember, what we did is took the hints that were in the Bible and applied them to the soul that manifested as Jesus of Nazareth. And it began with a nebulous person that is unproven scientifically called Emilius. And the next one then was Enoch. If you remember the stories about Enoch, a magic child that was born, light surrounded him, bright, brilliant hair, and the whole life was very brilliant, and he didn't die. Methuselah, who lived 600, 700, 800 years, and he also did not die. Then you had Melchizedek, neither father nor mother, and neither born nor died. These were all incarnations of the Spirit that manifested as Jesus of Nazareth. In the beginning, God created all of us, even every one of us. And at that time, we walked and talked symbolically with God in the garden, which is paradise. But it wasn't a physical. This was purely spiritual energy and the mind. We were mental beings. From that time on, we were meant to be co-creators and companions with one another and with the divine. So as our spirit, which was purely I, that's all it was. I am. That's our first condition. And then we felt that energy and we wanted to express it. And the overall creative energy wanted us to express it, to be co-creators and companions. And as we began to exercise that, we began to form the soul. And the soul is the vehicle that we have created for ourselves in order to express that creativity and that companionship. But we reached a point in time where we said, we have this to do. I'm going to do it my way. I don't care what y'all are doing. I think this is right, and I'm going to do it my way. At that time, we began to create the ego, and the ego began to get stronger and stronger and stronger as we began to do things our way. So as time went on, that early story in Genesis is the story of the falling of our soul, each and every one of us. We were the Enoch expression. We had an expression like Melchizedek, Methuselah. And if you read that, you see that these people were living 600, 800, 1,000 years. And then the lifespan began to decrease as we got more and more into the selfish ego, and we narrowed our consciousness to a point. So now we're dealing with an ego that we have created that we have to purify, perfect, or get back to the original perfection. Get back. See, the ego which says I am is not bad. The ego that says I am Edward Jamail starts running into trouble through all of those thousands of years. I am this. I am Cornelius. I am so-and-so. Developing that selfish, narrow ego. So, that golden thread of oneness, as we begin to trace that thread back through those lives, to take a look at those lives, to see why we are here today instead of someplace else, some other gender, some other race, some other color. Overall, I think we are here today because we've earned the United States of America. We've earned our place in this country, freedom for most of us, opportunity for all of us. So we've earned this. And overall, not getting into details of slavery and things like that and gender discrimination and all of that, overall, we're blessed to be in the United States of America. So what were we before that brought us here? And what can we do to plan the next life? So we're getting now into reincarnation. I would like to say this about reincarnation before I go any further. Personally, I have never been regressed, but I remember all of my lives. It happened during a near-death experience. So I've never been curious. When you get regressed by someone else, you better be damn well sure what that person's spiritual condition is. I know a person who, for example, went to a hypnotist to get himself weaned off of smoking. He stopped smoking, and he found an unconscionable leaning desire for pornography, which he had never had before in his life. So as he began to trace, what's happened to me? Why? I wasn't interested in this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and stuff like that. What they eventually came to was the hypnotist was addicted to pornography. And under hypnotism, there was a mind transfer. So that's why I say that I'm not opposed to hypnotism. Just be sure of the person that's doing it. Okay? So when it comes to reincarnation, especially in the Christian world, it's been controversial, unproven, false, diabolical, irrelevant, depending on your background. Reincarnation, the proof, is a very personal thing. I can tell you that you were Cleopatra, but you're taking my word for it. You might have a desire for Egypt, and you somehow transferred that to me verbally or whatnot, and so, yeah, you were Cleopatra, but you're taking my word for it. But if you remember Cleopatra drinking the poison or getting the snake bite, you remember that, then that's your own memory. So today in our workshop, we're looking at an adventure, remembering past lives, and I'll make a comment about that, if any. Not everybody in this world today has lived in the earth, in the third dimension before. I know one lady in Houston, I'm absolutely convinced she has never been in the earth before. Her soul has experienced life somewhere else, but not here. And I understand there are other people too that this is their first time. So I say, if any, and that's for you to decide. The other thing that's important is planning for your future life. Where are we heading, all of us, each of us? So working with this today, from now on, something may happen. You may today here get a spontaneous recall. You may go home and you may dream of something in your own dream life. Influences and patterns, it came from where? So in preparing this, I had a very interesting dream this morning, which was related to a previous life, but it, hadn't thought about it for maybe 10 years, in Egypt. And I sat up in the morning when I got up, and I thought for a minute and said, well, why did it come to me today? And I think it was a stimulus for me putting together this workshop. So dreams, and this work you begin to notice that tastes in clothing, taste in furniture, taste in food, it begin to stimulate or bring to your conscious mind things that you've never thought of before. Why do I like this? Why do I do that? So when you begin to focus like that, you're beginning to open into your higher consciousness, your own superconscious mind, where the memories are stored. The actual proof for all kinds of things spiritual is if you walk out of here and you go out into the desert, lock yourself into a remote house, go on to the top of a mountain, and pray and meditate until you have a breakthrough in consciousness, which would include all of your previous lives. Short of that, you're going to get hints. You're going to get understanding for why you are and what you like right now in this life. And that will continue to grow. So in the next life, you'll get further up into your own conscious mind, heading into the superconscious, which is to know yourself, to be yourself, and yet one with the entire cosmic universe. We call it in the West Christ consciousness. You could call it Buddha consciousness as well. Christ and Buddha, Christ went out into the desert, Buddha went under the bo tree, and they, to the exclusion of everything else, until they had that breakthrough in consciousness. Well, most people can't do that. So we get bits and pieces. And you begin to understand patience. You begin to look at in the past and see, and you have these aha moments. And you begin to think of things that you want the next life to be like. So the fact that you're here today is already beginning to form your next life in the understanding of your own spirituality and to your own journey into the oneness, back to the oneness. There are 3 laws that operate in the world today. There's the law of continuation, the law of consequences, and the law of compensation. Now, consequences usually have a negative influence for a lot of people. But there are good consequences as well. And that we have to keep reminding ourselves. Look at the blessings that you've had in this life. That's a good consequence. As far as continuation, when you begin to work with reincarnation, you begin to see that your soul has been forever and will be. That's one of the benefits. So we're going to look at a trip around the world. What we do, the way I handle this, you've got a worksheet, and we'll bring up a subject and give you about a minute to think about it. Now, nothing may come to mind now, but you're stimulating that unconscious mind. So if nothing comes up, don't worry about it. It will come to you maybe. Probably. So emotional reaction is a very important aspect of this recall. Talents, hobbies, interests. So looking at the first page, when I think of, first of all, just narrow it of a time period. Like I say, I woke up this morning with a very vivid image in Egypt, doing something in Egypt for a time period that seems to be important for me right now. So think of that, and you might make a note. Recent 1800s. Here is the problem with this as you begin to open your unconscious mind. You might come through with several time periods, several lives. So one of the things you're going to determine here, which has the biggest influence, which is usually the most recent life that you had. So don't lock yourself into the recent past. I know that, for example, I was here pre-revolutionary America. Really didn't like people. I was out in the wild, and I would only come into town to get some necessities. So that was my recent past in the United States of America. My most recent past period was at that period of time. So think about it, 1800s, Middle Ages, Dark Ages, or even earlier. If something comes to mind, write it in there. I'll give you about a minute for each one of these questions to think about it. So the next step is think about an area of the world that seems to be unusually attractive to you today. For example, the area of the world that had an awful lot of influence in my life today was Rome, 2,000 years ago. Now, I've seen myself in other places, my near-death experience. But today, this lifetime, I had a decision to make concerning my life in Rome. So I had 2,000 years to get ready for the decision in this lifetime. So, area of the world. The next question we come up with is typography, the terrain. Is there something that you particularly like? The mountains, seashore, deserts, plains, something like that. Then think about the climate. I know a lot of people that can't stand cold. Other people that can't stand the hot climates, like deserts or things like that. So think about generally climate which you're comfortable in. Plants. Do you like azaleas or do you like cactus? Think about that. And then, of course, animals. What kind of animals? Do you have an attraction to camels? That leads to the terrain that you might be interested in, for example. Is there a connection there? Is there a major event that triggers a memory? Is it peace, or civil war, or revolution, or general war? Some kind of event It spans over your whole lifetime in the past. What are you attracted to? And you think of things like in the Civil War, even though I was born and raised in the South with my parents, and they were born and raised in the South, nevertheless, I was pro-Union for some reason. From my past, I have a tendency, this sounds terrible, I was strongly attracted to both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. Now, consciously, I reject what they stood for, but I realized that unconsciously there was kind of an attraction to their destinies, to their activities, things like that. So event, Civil War, Revolutionary War. My Revolutionary War feeling when I was at recluse living up in the mountains, I could have been pro-English or I could have been pro-revolution, either way. I don't have a strong feeling about that. But maybe you do. Maybe you're strongly attracted. Freedom, you know. You have to think about those things. And then, of course, there is certain foods that I find my diet is pretty open, universal, with one exception. I like coleslaw, but I don't like cooked cabbage. I mean, like that. So think about the foods that you like. I do like very much Near Eastern foods, Mideast. All meat or vegetarian, mostly fish. Do you like Mexican food? What really stands out and what seems to be consistent in your life about the foods you like? What you see, what we're doing here is you're beginning to work up a profile. And the unconscious urgings or likes and dislikes that you have now are based on true life sometime else. So think about the foods. How about architecture? Is there a particular form of art that you like? Greek, Roman, Egyptian, African, excuse me, Oriental? Okay. How about clothing? Look at the areas there. Togas, oriental, shorts, barefoot, sandals, moccasins, boots. Is there any particular type of clothing that you generally like? You want to hand her out one of those? So you're not trying to identify, for example, if you like togas, was I Japanese or Chinese? Or Roman. We're not doing this right now. Just think of the nature of the clothing. Are you particularly attracted to that? Okay? So certain groups are the next phrase we're going to look at. Are you very strongly family oriented? I was raised in a clannish type of family, so I still kind of relate to clan type family. Is it important or not important? Do you like clubs, fraternities, or sororities? Special interests? Do you like playing cards? Do you have a hobby, model building? Do you like cooking? Do you enjoy charity, helping other people? Are you politically active? So certain things like that. Or are you a loner? There's that. So we're getting an overall picture here, basically. We'll get into more details coming up. And the next question coming up is the geographical locations. Are you attracted to the mountains or seashore or deserts or forests? For my case, basically, I do like the seashore, and I also like the mountains. Deserts, I'm not too attractive to. Forests, I can appreciate forests from a distance, more or less. So basically, for me, it's mountains and the seashore for the overall picture. Now let's look at, let's stop. Anybody have any questions about anything that we've done so far? Okay. Now we go to some heredity, physical strengths. There are certain things that you've always had all your life, where they're strong hands, slim or agile fingers. From an early age, not something that you've developed, but from the time of your early childhood. Okay, how about physical weaknesses or strengths? Weaknesses are very important, and now it's important really to go back into your memories to your childhood, growing up, because that's where you were closest consciously to a previous life that's going to influence this life. Now, when I say a previous life, I don't mean necessarily the immediate life preceding this. You may have needed a holiday. For example, I was very much in Rome over a couple of hundred years, and it took me about 1,500 years to break that connection, which I was finally tested in this lifetime and broke. Like everybody my age, I had to go into the Army. I went in as an officer, and I was very tempted to make the Army a career, and I decided no. That decision broke 1,000 years of tradition in Rome. I finally put the military behind me. So that's why I say the impulses that you had when you were very young are very important to this. Now, hopefully everybody's got pencils and they can erase what they've written, because if you go home and think about it more, ideas may come to you that are not coming now. So physical weaknesses when you were young, were there trouble spots in your body? Frequent illnesses, stomach, back, respiratory? birthmarks. Have you a birthmark? Where? The color? And the size? And again, this was when you were very young. I have a nephew that has terrible, very large. It's not terrible because it doesn't incapacitate him, but it's a very large mark on his back. And apparently, my idea was that he died in a fire in a previous life. And that birthmark was that he was very severe and totally conscious when he was burned. So birthmarks are interesting as an indicator. You may not have any particularly. Other physical features: a long neck, tiny feet, short, tall. Tiny feet, the thought that comes to me, and of course you may have a different thought, I'm not trying to influence you, would be that you were in China where they bound the women's feet. Might be an indication. Short, there could be a lot of reasons for being short, but perhaps you had an incarnation, a lifetime in Africa as a pygmy. So think about that for a while. Okay. And then we come to the area of attitudes, which are kind of something you were born with, kind of an unconscious thing. Explorer, were you an explorer? Do you like to explore? Get on the road and travel. An adventurer. Do you have a fear of water or a fear of heights? Claustrophobic. Are you a bookworm? Some of these types of attitudes. And certain people that you're attracted to. Certain types of people that you like. Certain types of people that you don't like. And now we're getting into an overall aspect is we're not on this journey alone. Never have been. So from the very beginning, we've been attracted to other people that were interested in the things that we were attracted to throughout all of the ages. So not only is it certain people you like or dislike, you want to add in there certain groups of people. Are there certain groups? Are you oriented to a sorority or a fraternity? Are you oriented to groups of people that are interested in astronomy or some special interest groups like that? So we do travel in groups, and we're not all together on the same page. Let me explain that. In my life, I was in Egypt, a sort of a mythical time which historians and archaeologists don't recognize, but the Egyptians called it the Golden Age. Now this was an age where the souls were living longer in the earth, and we were already dividing into groups. In that particular age, my group manifested. There was a pharaoh, and then there was a high priest. Many people that I know in the spiritual life, metaphysical life, were subjects of a high priest, devotees, disciples. They'd been in the spiritual life going back more than 5,000 years. I was loyal to the Pharaoh. And there was a clash. Needless to say, Pharaoh won. And the high priest and his disciples were exiled out of Egypt. And I was the one responsible for seeing that they crossed that border to the south. So that was a group of people working together, but not on the same page, not on the same side. And it's only been in this lifetime that I've come to the spiritual aspect of life. Just this lifetime. And it took a near-death experience, February 1969, to change me. So now I'm together with the high priests group of people. These are people that are spiritually oriented. So when I talk about groups, you think about the groups that you're attracted to or groups that you are not attracted to, strongly not attracted to. Okay? Now I'll pause there and ask if there's any questions yet so far. We're breezing through this.
Well, does it have to be like a reincarnation, or can you tell you an experience that I've had? That I recognize myself. I go outside, sitting on the front porch, and there's been several times that it's like different fragrances. You go and they keep coming, and I smell them, then they go away. And then I have another fragrance. Do you know what's going on?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You do?
I like I say, I can remember all of my lifetimes to the very beginning, coming into the earth, and I was very military. Egypt, Babylon, Japan, Peru, Rome. My preference was Rome over Greece, for example, when it came to architecture. So you see how it begins to blend. So I had several lifetimes in Rome where I was a military, and I commanded legions. I wasn't a Caesar, but I did command armies. In the lifetime that I had in Rome, I was going back to Rome after a tour of duty, and I rode on a horse, and it was a particular time period. I sat on the horse and looked over the city, and I felt profound sadness because the Rome I grew up with was not the Rome that existed then. The city had become very decadent. So I saw, I didn't know when, didn't have a time period, the decline of Rome. I hope I'm wrong, but I have kind of that feeling for the United States today. Maybe 100, 200 years, but I have that same feeling I can connect with that I had sitting on that horse, looking at that magnificent city there, but know that it was declining. So we begin to see some of the connectivity and what I'm talking about, to these lives, what we're trying to form. And that bears on the future. I know where I'm going to be in the future, but that's something else. Okay, early childhood. Now this is important because your unconscious mind, with its memories, are right there closest to a childhood. So pick a time in your childhood where you have the earliest memory and write that time down. Okay, you may not remember a specific event, but you can say 3 years old. And so you begin to stimulate your memory regarding to that 3 years of life. Okay? So pick a time, pick an age, pick a place. Not everybody born and raised in Houston, so you have to kind of focus on the place where you were born. Okay? Early childhood, what were you doing? See, going in line with the adventurer and the explorer, the first memory I have, I ran away from home at 3. My mother had given birth to my brother Jim, which was the second baby, and all the ladies were surrounding the bed. I can picture it. I'm in the living room. There was the bedroom, and oh and ah, and look at the new baby and all this kind of stuff, and I felt totally neglected, so I decided to run away. I walked out of the house and ran all the way down to the end of the block, and unfortunately there's a funeral. The person died in that very end house, and they were carrying the body out to the ambulance, and I decided to go back home. So that was my first memory. Age 3. Okay. What kind of toys did you like? Was there anything particular? Activities you like? Like a lot of children at that age for me, we played cowboys and Indians. But the interesting thing, I was always the cowboy. Now my younger brother, Jim, was always the Indian. Always. Most of our family were tall. I was a little taller than I am now. I've lost a couple of inches as I got older. Jim was always short, and he was always wiry, and he looked exactly like an Indian. So he had carried over those characteristics from a immediate previous life, or a life he had to deal with, into this life. Always preferred to be the Indian. I preferred to be the cowboy. That's a reflection on the Roman experience military, you see, carried over. Stories you like. I liked history and science fiction. So what kind of stories do you like in your life? Again, we're getting an overall view. We want to stimulate your memory, and some of these memories may come back after the session when you get home and you're thinking about it. One of the big things about memory that always stands out in my life was Mozart. At the age of 4 or 5, he could play the piano when his feet couldn't even touch the pedal, but he was playing music, born that way. And so many of the artists that we have in life had that from the very beginning. It was not developed. Okay. Discovering some past life clues. First of all, deja vu. Have you ever been in a place where suddenly you felt like you'd been in that place before, and very strong feeling, or you knew the circumstances about something, it seems very familiar to you? Deja vu. So the more that you get in this, the more you'll get your deja vu activities. Meditations. I say this about meditation. First of all, you do not meditate for something. Meditation is an end to itself, to move up into the silence, to connect as much as possible with the cosmic consciousness, which in that case for this body will be the silence. For me, I can take a deep breath. I visualize the energy rising up through my body to the top of my head to where I cannot take another breath. And in that split second, when I cannot take another breath, there is silence. Try to hold on to that as much as possible. That's meditation. Okay? But when you come out of meditation, if you've been working on this, you will have ideas come to you. You're not meditating for the ideas, but they will come to you. So I put meditations there, but it's a stimulus, more like. religious feelings and experiences or the lack of it. Have you been particularly oriented to a particular religion or techniques of that religion? I had extremely disturbing experience with an individual from another group 3 weeks ago when it comes to religion. I am a follower of Jesus of Nazareth. Okay. I have had insights into his life, my study of the scripture, that have just really magnified the whole thing. But basically, you see, we don't know what the teachings of Jesus were. We just have a snapshot. If you add up the experiences they relate in the New Testament, it might add up to 3 or 4 months. But he was with the disciples for 3 years. And we don't know what he was teaching those people every day in those 3 years. We get the snapshot, the highlights, right? And the more I've studied that and looked into traditional Christianity, the viewpoint from Eastern Christianity, and then some of the detailed scriptures that we have in the West, the more I really begin to appreciate and realize what the soul that manifested as Jesus really did. That soul had taken upon itself a rescue mission to come into the earth all those lifetimes to help people regain their consciousness, culminating in the life of Jesus. 3 weeks ago, I had a person come in with 1.5 pages of ideas trashing Jesus. He was insane. He was hallucinating. He talked to angels and demons. He was suicidal. He allowed himself to be crucified. I mean, 1.5 pages that actually turned my stomach, so to speak. And I had worked with this individual one-on-one for some time and thought that maybe he was changing somewhat. But I told him that he was no longer should come to the group that we were in, that he didn't believe in the ideas and the ideals, and it would be better for him to, stay away. Unless when he came to that group, that he would follow the details of that group's meeting, So I was really appalled at the ideas that he had about Jesus of Nazareth. If you look at it at the logical mind, it may not look logical, what Jesus did. For example, if you ever run across it, he said he despaired on the cross. That was one idea he had. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Or he was proposing that he got a substitute to get crucified in his place. And so he brought up the my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I said that was a psalm from the Psalms. It's a psalm of praise. It begins by saying it looks like everything's desperate, but it ends in victory. So there he is hanging on the cross, and he is singing the psalm of victory. But if you read the words, most of us hear, my God, why thou hast forsaken me, and they've never read this whole psalm. I pointed that out to him. So it was an interesting experience when it came to religious feelings and experiences. Because in all my life, I have been very tolerant of all religions and all varieties of Christian religion. But I have never seen that expression about Jesus of Nazareth. Because my view is a soul that has come in life after life out of life to try to raise us up. He was Enoch. He was Methuselah. He was Melchizedek. He was Jeshua. The interesting thing about Jeshua, most people don't know that in very profound Christian theology, some of the philosophical writings that you don't see too much of, it is said that Jeshua was an aide to Moses, and he was the channel through which Moses got the 10 Commandments. But there was Jesus as Jeshua, and there was Jesus who led the people out of Babylon back to Israel after that. And there was Jesus that was Asaph, the choir master to King David. If you look at all those lifetimes, he was raising consciousness, you see, culminating in the life of Jesus. So I had a profound respect for that soul and its activities, and I've never been shocked to hear somebody who didn't appreciate it like that. So that's the religious feelings and experience, or the lack of. If you've run across that, it's something you can work with because it's an indication to you. Why are you experiencing that? Okay. We come now to, anybody have any questions at that point? Okay. Dreams. Dreams of foreign origin. Have you ever had a consistent dream, or even one very significant dream, dealing with foreign countries, foreign people? If so, write it down if you can remember it. You may remember it once you get home, but anyway. Foreign dress or costumes. Is there something in particular you're attracted to? The saris of India, or the togas of Rome, or something like that. Is there a particular dress that you like? Or what do you do to get comfortable when you finish the day and you're home and that was it? How do you dress? Sometimes that's a good indication of where you are from. Speaking a foreign language in your dreams. Have you ever spoken in a foreign language? And not known necessarily what it was saying, but nevertheless the words were there. Did you ever dream about a future life, or a different race rather? That's another indication. And sometimes not in your dreams, but you're particularly attracted to that race. And so the other thing is a setting in another culture or historical period. And that'll take some thought, and you might want to elaborate a little more once you're by yourself when you leave here. Okay. So kind of summing it up, has anybody got any questions at this point that we've gone through all of this? Take a break? Sure. Let's right now have 5 minutes to 2. Why don't we come back at 2 o'clock? Okay?
And is it true you come back in the same families when you're reincarnated?
Oh, yes.
There's more water in there.
I mentioned coming back in groups. The group that is the most popular for most people to come back would be the family. The clans stimulate a very strong emotional return. Part of a clan.
Do you think they lived through the same trials and tribulations as they did?
I'm sorry, if they...
Same trials and problems that they had? They have to relive them again?
Well, it could be. say, like in my case in the military, I mentioned to you many lifetimes in the military. In this lifetime, I broke it. So it's the same way in a relationship with somebody in the family. It may be a healing, and the healing could be a break. So that's what's important to you personally. If you've had a problem with the characteristics of another person and you get the best of it, you move on. The other person who's got a problem with you and hadn't gotten over it may have to meet the same characteristics in somebody else. So we're not stuck with one another. If we begin to grow spiritually, we begin to create a whole new series of relationships and, like that. Both individually, family, and in groups. This becomes, when you step back from all of this and look at the overall picture, it becomes a fascinating journey, and continue it, because there's more than one lifetime that affects this lifetime.
My husband's family, they have an ongoing thing that started years ago. The men don't value their wives, and they divorced, which years ago that was really a no. You know?
Yeah.
But it's continued right down the line of family.
Let's remind me, and we'll answer that when everybody comes back. Okay, there's still a few people there.
Yeah, there was a book that I read in here. I don't know even the title of it now, but these men, there's two men, and they're in like a coliseum, and they had just died, and they said, "Oh, that was so much fun. Let's come back and switch roles." And it was a father-son. They had been different combinations over the lifetimes, but let's come back and let's be father and son and switch roles this time. And that's made so much sense to me. It was like, oh, okay. What that made sense, why my sister and mother maybe had a problem between them, and but my mother and I did not. And it still persists, even though mother has passed. My sister and I still kind of come like this over things that we perceive happening in this lifetime.
The importance in all those relationships, as for each one of us as individuals, to learn to love unconditionally. Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing. My brother and my sister and myself have radically, and I mean radically, different views on politics, so we agree not to talk politics, and I love both of them dearly. We just know not to approach certain subjects.
And we don't talk about certain things.
So there are a lot of variations of that theme. And so you dwell on the things that unite you and not what separate you. That's the basic. Are we on here?
I thought that was interesting that they come back together and say, "Oh, well, that was fun.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Let's try it the other way around." I thought, oh, okay.
Has anybody ever hit themselves in the head and said, I could have had a PA? What was I thinking?
Well, you see, if you read the...
Yeah, I just slap on the back of the head or something.
Yeah. If you read the subtleties of the scripture that we have it, and depending on your Bible, read the footnotes. And I have the Jerusalem Bible. The footnotes sometimes take up a whole page, and it gives you insights to what theologians over the ages thought about the subject. For example, in the very beginning, we were all androgynous. We were both masculine and feminine. And that's the initial story in Genesis of Adam and Eve. In the beginning, God created humanity. They were Adam and Eve. It's only in the second paragraph of the second chapter, I forget which, that he separated the two out. Now, in the Eastern language, it says that he took a rib out of Adam to create Eve. And I have a doctor I know that firmly believes that men have one less rib than women. He's a doctor. But that's because it's scriptural. He's also a fundamentalist. But actually, in the Eastern language, it says he was taken out. They were separated. So Eve wasn't created from a rib from Adam. The two, masculine and feminine, separated. And we've been trying to get back ever since to that unity. So that's where soulmates or twin souls come about. You were both. But rarely does the masculine and the feminine part come into the earth at the same time. So for most of you, your masculine aspect is up here right with you, can inspire your unconscious mind. And for me, the feminine is up there. Now, the only exception I can think of is Jesus and Mary. So in Catholic theology, they say that they were one soul that separated. I mean, you have to really dig into Catholic theology to see that. So rarely do they incarnate in the same life, but in that lifetime they did. Mary as a mother and Jesus as a son. Okay. We're all back. Now, what was your question? Anybody remember the question? I should have written it down myself. Had to do with...
You were asking if families came together. Right? If you turn back to the side.
Oh. We come in, yeah. The idea that came to me as you were asking the question, we do have relationships with another soul. But if we have solved that relationship, we don't have to stay together. The thought that comes to me was a lady that was getting divorced. And it was a very amiable divorce. And she had this very vivid dream that she was in a kind of a sunroom with French doors looking out on the garden. And she went over and she closed the French doors. In other words, what the dream was telling her, she and her husband had had a relationship in France. And they had something to work out. They worked it out, and she was putting a close to that whole French experience. So...
Well, I know what she was talking about, generations of people getting divorced, carrying it on from one generation
To the next.
to the next. I think that's what.
And disowning family members and...
Well, we do come back in groups, and we can change groups. I've had the strongest impression personally that I came from a very clannish family. And, born in 1937, that's when families pretty much lived together within the same area, and they were close.
Yeah.
But I have a strong feeling at this point in my life that I have closed the door on most, if not all, of the individuals in my immediate family that I grew up with. Relationships are interesting. But it's growth, and the underlying thing that if you come into a very troubled relationship, you may not solve the trouble, but you got to take the feeling of love. Now, that's one of the values of meditation and getting to know yourself, which this helps. To see that yourself is a spirit, an energy force, a mind that's just manifesting as a body. And if you can see it in yourself, then you begin to see it in other people. And you can see that that light in them is the same light that's in you. And if you can part in love, then it doesn't matter what the activities at the time might have been. Love is the bottom line. Anybody else?
Do we have to come back?
No. If you want to go up to the top of a mountain or out into the desert and meditate and pray until you get Christ consciousness, you don't have to come back, but you probably will. You will, because in that consciousness you will want to help other people.
No, I ask him every day, please don't send me back. Yeah.
I've had enough.
Well, there are different dimensions. I'm of the impression, personally, I'm not going to swear to it, but that the earth has 7 dimensions. In other words, this sphere of the earth has 7 dimensions. And we're going into a period of peace, 1,000 years of peace mentioned in the book of Revelations, and which has been mentioned by various mystics since then. In that 1,000 years of peace, the souls who are not peaceful, and we're now in a period of decision making, the souls that are not peaceful and seeking love and seeking a higher consciousness will be in the earth, and those souls who are not will be held out. So the earth will have 1,000 years of peace. At the end of that time, the souls that are peace learning will have learned and gotten educated and moving up in consciousness. At the end of the 1,000 years, the gates will be open and the other souls will come back in. But there will be more high souls to work with them. So that's the story of the 1,000 years of peace. Yeah.
Do you find in your time of speaking with different groups that people are seeking something more now? They're coming forth, awakening, opening up to their higher self. Do you find that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I say, I really feel that there's a division coming about in the earth between the souls who are moving up in consciousness and those who aren't. If you remember for those of you that, this is the model, the human model. That pinpoint at the very tip is our conscious mind. Up here at the superconscious mind, that's Christ consciousness. We're right there next to cosmic consciousness. That's where we know ourselves to be ourselves and yet one with the universal forces. But most of us are really stuck at this pinpoint and the senses and whatnot. But for those who are seeking, they're beginning to move up in consciousness. What I was saying is that you can become Christ conscious, to know yourself, to be yourself, and yet one with the whole. If you want to isolate yourself and spend that whole time in prayer and meditation. Jesus in the desert, Buddha under the bo tree. He said, go away and leave me alone. I'm going to stay here until I get it. But most of us can't do that. So we're moving up in consciousness in degrees. And that's where the art of patience. I like to think I'm not impatient. I'm looking forward to a next life and moving up in consciousness.
I find I'm constantly interrupted. I try, and I'm interrupted all the time.
Just periodic. Pick up some trick, some habit. My trick in moving in consciousness is breath work. I can be driving a car. I can pause for a minute here while we're riding, and I will visualize breathing in very slowly, the energy rising from my feet to the top of my head. Hold it for a second, because in that second, when you can't take another breath, there's silence. And that's where cosmic consciousness is. And then very slowly release it back down through the body. You can do that many times a day without even pausing, walking or working or whatnot. You simply do that breath work. That's my trick. Everybody develops their own trick or technique, but that's my technique. Yeah.
You had said that you remember your past lives. Do you remember future lives?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll mention that when we get to that section. Okay. What you want to do when you finish with what we've done so far, and this is probably to take it home, when you have a time where you can be quiet, is review your responses to everything in that we've exercised. There are some things you may not have been ready to put in as an answer, and the answer comes to it, you can add it. There are some things that maybe now doesn't seem quite right. Is there a key element through each one of the subjects? The key element in my life was about 5,000 years of being in the military. And this life, I ended it. So it's taken that long. But in the soul level, the spirit, time doesn't matter, you see. But I ended that experience. So that's what I'm saying. There's a key element that you see in your lives. And it may not be something you want to end. It may be something you want to develop. Look at Mozart. He brought on into his life, previous life, music. And here this kid was creating and playing music, and his feet couldn't even touch the pedals. So it continues a good thing. And that's true for all of it. It's not all negative. I don't really think that my life in the military was negative. There was a learning experience there. There was an ideal that we began to work with way back then. Okay? So the key element, is there a positive past life clue or influence that you can think of? Like if you had a life in Japan where you're interested in Japanese interior decorating, if you're interested in Japanese clothing, are you fascinated by the idea of samurai swords maybe? Something in another culture or another time and place which you find yourself kind of interested in ever this thread through your life so far. So is there a positive life clue? To me, the military and the Japanese and all that was self-discipline. That's what I need to break through in consciousness, you see, for me, was the discipline. And the military taught me that. Well, is there ways you can use these influences to make your life better today? So if there's something that you've always been interested in, can you go back and start working on it? Start developing it? Think about it. I had always basically wanted to be an astronomer, but the situation at the time when I was ready to go to college forced me into A&M, which at that time was an all-military college. So my karma was working against some basic desires. But once I got out of it, the interesting thing about it is my service in the military had to do with long-range radars. It had to do with sky things and all that kind of stuff. And when I got out of the military, I took the equivalent of a year's course in astronomy by the professor who put together the lunar charts for NASA. So I haven't done too much with that since then, but I can see in the future where I will continue. I still have a telescope and all the equipment. So I can see that in the future, that could be something I would probably be deeply involved with, is astronomy. So look at those things. That leads us into the future life, mental attitudes. What are you preparing for mentally? The biggest safeguard that we have mentally, first of all, is to realize that we are pure energy and pure mind, not this physical body. And then to project it and see it in other people, a positive mental attitude. One of the things that we can say to it, we have let me go on and say, I'll give you this in just a minute. Look at the surroundings that you like, that you prefer. Conditions, if you will. I could like a seashore or a mountain environment, one or the other. So I have a feeling that I'll be exposed to one or the other in the next life. So think about that as to the surroundings and the conditions. And what positive influence today that you have that you might have a role in the next life? Is it an idea of a service of some kind? Do you enjoy helping people less fortunate than yourself? Do you enjoy, like say, if you're a good cook and you want to share that and you're helping other people, teaching them your techniques for cooking? Something like that you're good at and you want to share. So those are the conditions which you can imagine for your next life. Because right now, right this moment, we're beginning our procession, our progress into the next life. The fact that you're here now means that this whole body of information, being a spirit and having life in the earth, will increase. You'll increase your consciousness in your next life. Because this is where you've put your energy today, into that consciousness. Continue it. Continue your interest. Okay? Transfer any negatives into a positive expression. That's the big thing. If there's a problem with a person or situation, I have a friend of mine that came up with a prayer that I think is very good. He, she, or it is thine, even as I am thine. Do that brings peace and harmony between us. You're not forcing yourself on the other person. You're preparing, you're conditioning your own mind. You're conditioning the way you see the person or the situation. He, she, or it is thine, even as I am thine. Do that brings peace and harmony between us. The peace and harmony is in my mind. Because if the person doesn't respond, you will not be together. That's a simple thing. Your vibrations have changed. So you will each go your own way. But ideally, there will be a reconciliation if that's called for, and you'll have peace of mind in that with that person or that situation. Okay. The importance of knowing about past lives and working with this is that you really get a firm idea, no doubt in your mind, that you are a spiritual being, far and beyond this personal body, that has traveled through time. And you begin to see the golden thread in your life of oneness since the time of beginning to your time here now. That's why it gets exciting. You begin to see that continuity and the experiences and what you've learned. So, like Jesus, we each have that golden thread in our life. That's the end of the workshop that I can think of.
Do you think animals reincarnate? Animals, do they reincarnate?
As I understand it, there is one soul that manifests every species of a particular animal. That soul is constantly reincarnating. So if you have an animal that is characteristics that you particularly like, and you'd like to have more of it, that soul will manifest an animal that will have those characteristics, but it will not be the same animal that was living at the time. But as I understand it, there's just one soul for one species, one soul for dogs, one soul for cats. Yes, Mary.
I was curious about babies, if they kind of will have a feeling about certain family members stronger for some family members than others, and others until they get to that age where they're kind of led to believe certain things. If they just instinctively reach out to people that they may have known from other lifetimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's definitely that. And they're born in that way for an opportunity to reconcile those feelings. When I was talking early on in this, if you remember, we talked a lot about childhood feelings. That's because the unconscious mind expresses stronger in a child from about 1 to 6, 5 or 6, from that time to 5 or 6. And so if there's something that's going to come about, I have a perfect story about that. It's so funny. I know the persons involved, one of them now deceased, unfortunately. Dr. Charlie Evans was a veterinarian, and her father was a veterinarian. They grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida, and Charlie says of her father, he was the biggest bigot that you'd ever want. He hated African American people. So Charlie went on up, and she got her degree in veterinary medicine, was practicing, and she joined the group that helps underprivileged children have weekend experiences, the zoo or a movie theater, or go to the seashore or something like that. And she had on one little black boy, Eric, but she got Eric when he was 12, 13 years old. And if the environment's real bad, it's kind of hard to rescue somebody that's had that many years in that environment. Eric got into drugs, and he is today in jail. Now, I'm going back with this incident 20 years ago, but Eric is so bad he's in jail today. But Eric had a baby by his girlfriend, and Charlie immediately went to court and got the adoption, got the right to be the guardian for the baby. And then as a couple of years went by, she got the court to give her adoption rights for that baby. We call him Little Eric. So, really dark black person. So one day, Charlie's sitting in the sofa in her living room, reading a book. Little Eric, 3 years old, is in another room playing. And he comes waddling into the room and he says, "Charlie, do you remember when I was your father?" She fell off the sofa. She literally fell off the sofa. Like I say, her father was one of the biggest bigots in St. Petersburg that she knew of. So here was the father coming back as a black person, but being adopted by a daughter who was very broad-minded. You see the lesson? Very, very interesting. That's one experience I know personally. I know the people involved. Anybody else have any questions?
I think children have a good judge of character. Some children, there's some people they just do not like.
That's an indication, yes. But for them, they have to understand. That's why working with this kind of work is important. They have to see what it is about that person they dislike,
Yeah.
and then find out they're not reacting to the person. They're reacting to the characteristics of the manifestation from that person. And so the thing is, why are you reacting to these conditions, whatever they may be? Anybody else? Well, we're going to get out a little early here.
Do you have future memories?
Yes. Very strong future memories. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, I'd have to go back and get the exact time. In all my travels around the world, I've never gone on a tour with other people. But on this particular time, I went on a tour for a small group of about 20 people that were going to China. China had just opened up to tourism. I went into China with very strong feelings about the Red Guards, about communism, that whole scene. But I was attracted to kind of the Chinese architecture, Chinese food, something. So I wanted to go see the historical China. And I joined this group to go with. Well, I was absolutely overwhelmed. I fell in love with China. Everything about it. the people, the architecture, the food, the music, everything. That's going to be my future life. And that's why I reacted emotionally. And it was so vivid that I know that that's where I'm going to be next time. When exactly, I'm not sure. Usually, reincarnation takes about 30 years between life. Not always. Sometimes there's some people that may take much longer before they're ready to reincarnate again. But generally speaking, from all of the evidence I've seen and heard and listened to and people I know, about 30 years. People who are killed in war, there were a lot of Americans, and probably on the other side as well, during World War II. They came back pretty quick. I base that on the work of a Dr. Aronson Hein, who was a Dutch psychotherapist. And right after World War II, he began to see an awful lot of people. And in his work with those people, and he was a hypnotherapist, but with a very high spiritual principle person. He hypnotized one person that was really torn apart and having trouble in their life. And it turned out he'd been a German soldier who was occupying the Netherlands. And this was less than 20 years after the war was over with. So the soldiers, Dr. Hein went on and did his research and found that many of the people who died, young people especially, during the war, were coming back faster.
They haven't learned their lesson. They haven't lived their
Exactly
their
right.
time.
Exactly right, yeah. Well, they had something to learn in that war, so it wouldn't have put them in that place. I mean, why were you born here and not in Germany or France or Dutch, you know? But they, you know, and I wonder again about this problem in the Ukraine. In the world of cause and effect, the second law, which is the law of consequences, evidently the Ukrainians are experiencing something they had to experience based on their previous life. And the Russians are doing something they have to experience. And there were two ways which the Russians could have done this. They could have expressed their interest and concern peacefully, but they chose militarily. Now, I mentioned to a couple of others, we were talking real early when I got here. I was hoping that with modern technology and communication and travel, that the world was coming together basically overall for a better place. Unfortunately, the next world that's coming around will have to have a place where Vladimir Putin and his allies and his sympathizers will have to experience what they did to the Ukraine. So there will be a world where there's war.
There's just no winners in a war. Haven't they learned that now by this time?
The
Yeah.
rich people who make the weapons. they're
Oh,
the
is that
winners.
So
It's just never a winner on either side.
No, it's really quite sad. Like I say, I was hoping for this.
But do people have a sign a contract before they come into this lifetime saying that they agree to learn these lessons? That doesn't mean that they actually follow through on learning the lessons, but that's the basic idea when they before they come into this life, and that's why sometimes that I think children are aborted because you say, oh, wait a minute, I don't think I want to do that.
Well, we can think of so many things in history, both as individuals and as groups. I kill you, you kill me, back and forth over the ages. But somewhere along the line, one of us gets spirituality. So instead of that person killing me, if it's you that got the spirituality, it may come as a pat on the shoulder instead of killing me. Putin had the same way. There were an awful lot of diplomatic situations that he could have addressed and used rather than military. So that was a choice. When we all have that choice of how we react. We may not. I have had somewhat of a concern about the United States of America in that since the very beginning of this country, we have destroyed culture after culture. Native American cultures. Here in Texas, the Spanish culture and heritage.
They'll take over Texas.
Yeah.
One person at a time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't know they Spanish.
So I think that I mentioned before in this work we had groups, and that also includes nations. And a lot of the good karma which this country may have indulged in was the unbelievable amounts of aid that we have given to hungry people, distressed countries. If we had an old consciousness, we would have absolutely raked Germany and Japan. We didn't. We built them up. And that's good karma.
Well, we did invest a lot in Germany as far as mills that actually created new fabrics and new kinds of mills, because being around fabrics for a long time, in this country we didn't have mills that could mill, for example, weave 130-inch fabric or 118-inch fabric. But we set Germany up so that they could create those kind of fabrics.
Sure.
With brand new machines.
Sure. Yeah, so that's good karma. And this country, as a country, did it. But basically, a country is a group of people that have come together for a purpose. And there is group karma. And like I say, in my case, in Egypt, I was Pharaoh's man, opposite to all the spirituality represented by the high priest. And in this lifetime, I've overcome it, because now I have, in this lifetime, in the last 40 years, I've become reacquainted with a lot of those people, and we work very well together. But it's because I changed. I discovered my spirituality.
That's something. When I first learned about reincarnation, what made so much sense. And then I don't know if I was, but the fact that I could have walked the earth the same time Jesus did just really burst my heart in a good way. I might not have, but the fact that I could have.
Yeah. I was in the earth when Jesus was there. I was a Roman legionnaire stationed in Antioch. Now, I wasn't involved in the Jesus affair. But I was there at the same time, and I was aware of the movement. I was aware of small groups becoming, which we call now Christians. And I knew they were developing. So as part of the Roman exercise, they were going to keep your eye on the groups. They're always dangerous to empire when secret groups are forming. But didn't take any action. And I was in Antioch, and all of that took place.
Yeah. It's sad.
Yes.
Is there a certain resource or book that goes over the many lives of Yeshua in particular?
I'd have to find the answer to that. What I've put together here is pretty much what I've learned over the last 40 or 50 years being in this work. There are books, I know. I'll tell you what, I'll be here tomorrow. I'll get a couple of titles and I'll bring them. If you're going to be here tomorrow for the... Yeah, I will be here tomorrow morning, and the topic on this... What is the topic going to be? Let me see here.
The spiritual path.
The spiritual path. So, actually, when I did the talk on the golden thread of oneness, it was leading up to this reincarnation. And so having seen this, and as you review it, and as you become acquainted perhaps with past lives, as you desire a higher consciousness for a future life, then the talk tomorrow is going to be the spiritual path.
And why is there so much resistance to the idea of previous lifetimes when it makes so much sense if somebody actually never even got to live a lifetime? Why would a creator say, okay, that's it, we're all gonna go to heaven, we're gonna sit around and gonna have a joyous time. That seems like that could be a little misleading.
In the East, particularly India and China and Japan, they take reincarnation for granted.
I always have, I don't know why I believed in it, but when I mention it to some people, it's like,
I know
oh,
what
you don't. Yeah, but I don't believe it now. My husband and I have this discussion.
Well, those people say that to me, and you know what my first thought is? I don't say it because I don't want to say, what are you afraid of? Meeting yourself, yeah.
In your studies, have you come across any additional lifetimes of Yeshua since the time of Jesus?
For me?
Yeah, have you
Oh,
heard
yeah.
of any or
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
since lineage, since 2,000 years ago?
I saw highlights of every life from the moment my soul first noticed the earth and came into it. And that was because of the near-death experience. Now, at some point in that, at the end of that experience, I had a decision to make, to come back or not. But when I had this experience, I had my fingers in a lot of pots. I had a lot of obligations. I was politically ambitious, socially ambitious. And there were things I needed to clean up. So I'm sitting here looking at the earth. I say sitting. I didn't have a body. The body's down there on a gurney. But figuratively speaking, I'm sitting cross-legged and looking at the earth, and I made the decision to come back instantly. I came back to the body so fast, I literally bounced on the bed. And I've never been so cold in my life. They covered me with blankets, 2 or 3 blankets to warm me up. But yeah, I remember that coming back, and it was my choice to come back. But you know, people talk about how long to live, and the thing is, have something that you want to do in this lifetime, and you'll get that extra years on your life. Fix it firmly in your mind. You'll come back to it in another life, if it's positive.